Yes guys, I'm just going to do a quick one here on this dove, demonstrating texturising and building out the shading. Now this isn't a tattoo where I line everything and then add the shading. What I'm doing is I'm creating all the shapes with shading alone. So when I've got a lining needle on, I'm creating these textures and gliding on and off the skin in a pendulum like method. Even though it's a liner, I can still generate these like wispy shading strokes. So essentially when I clean it, it's not feathered in like a solid black line. It's got a softer edge to it and a more seamless blend to the textures that I'm adding in to create this fur effect. So with my initial mapping layer, I'm going to be planting in these sections of shading. Sorry, these sections of texture. Then I can run my shading through it and start to build it out. Rather than do the whole thing, I'm just going to do a little section to demonstrate this for you, so that then you can see how it works in principle. When you're shading these kind of pieces, what I see a lot, what can kind of ruin the look of it, is by over shading. Now you've got to leave some areas of the tattoo as skin showing through to develop some contrast in the piece. I'm adding shading in here, I'm going to build that out a little bit more, but by moving around the piece I'm not risking overdoing it. That ability to have the confidence to do a little area and then move on somewhere else is going to level up your efficiency to get this tattoo in accurately and build out these shapes. Again, I'm not wanting to cover every single little bit with fur strokes and feather strokes because it's going to look tacky. So it's about picking out the features that you can see on the picture, and then when I start to run my shading through it, it's going to just bring that together. So when you're first mapping these shapes in, they kind of look darker than they're going to be. Now when I add a soft blend of shading through these, it kind of hides them a little bit. So what I'm saying is when you're adding these textures in, you can't add them in too light, because that when you add the shading in, it'll just merge together and you won't see it. So when I'm doing this kind of technique where I'm texturising rather than lining, the needle never glides aggressively on the skin or anything like that. Every time it strikes the skin, it's just a little glide, and I'm kind of feathering in to get these shapes in the skin. If I'm filling any more solid sections, I'll wiggle the needle into the skin and hover it. So I'm in the skin there ever so slightly and I'm just wiggling back and forth. But I'm in the skin so light on the skin that I'm barely saturating it. It's not going in harshly. So once I've added them few textures in, I can come to my shading needle now. Again, I don't need to hit that shading, so after one pass across the area I'm doing, am I trying to complete it in one go? So there's a certain amount of building up and manoeuvring round. When I'm training artists on my training course, one thing that I'm a huge supporter of is moving around the piece. It allows to keep your concentration high And also on top of that, it stops you overdoing it. So even though I've built this shade in here, I can come back into it and start to develop it further. But the dove should develop as an entire piece, so it should all sort of get finished at the same time, because I'll still be feathering back over different bits. So I'm just developing the shading from the beak there and bringing it round. Few strokes in, and then I can move on, can blend that out more as I develop these shapes. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to complete it in one go. Just bringing in that edge now. Are we focused in, Arv? Yeah. Mm-hmm. My guy. So I'm just using a pendulum method there to glide on and off the skin. Sometimes you'll see me moving my hand in different positions. It's always keeping the skin stretched, but quite often I'll have it out the way. It might be stretching further over here, and sometimes it's stretching like a pinpoint if I'm doing really fine details. So again, it just depends. Starting to connect that bit of the head up now. When my needles are striking the skin, I'm doing it very deliberately. I'm not one of those messy artists that's like literally just ramming shading everywhere. I'm watching those needle tips contact the skin, and I'm ensuring that they're going in exactly where I want them to, and they're putting the shading in exactly how I want it to. Bit of a gap along here. You're already getting a picture of how it's building up and how sections look incomplete, because I've not quite got there yet. Even though I've started certain sections, I'm going to revisit and come down my pots with my lighter washes, blend things out. It's important to not saturate your pots down too early. If you come in them lighter pots too soon through fear of going too dark, you can risk putting ink in that looks like it's in nice and solid, the piece looks saturated and the values look quite dark, but what's actually happened is you've put really light ink in. Once it heals and you lose a certain percentage of the ink from the skin, it's going to look too faded. So it's a common mistake with new artists when they're mindful that they're trying to not go too dark. You can risk going too light. Are we zoomed in, Arv, on that needle? Mm-hmm. Keep the needle in the centre of the screen if you can as well. You've got to move it a little bit. Nah, it's alright, mate. See you tomorrow, bro. So suddenly these mapping sections are put in. You can see how they've been softened by adding the layer of shading, the first initial layer. This whole dove is going to be predominantly built out with shading. These shapes aren't lines. These are this is textured mapping, so I'm mapping out little sections of detail. Now, if I was to line the whole piece, the whole outside with a bold line, it's going to look very traditional. It's going to lose a more realistic look that you can get by blending it with shading. And show you that bit I've done. This is yet to have another layer of sort of softer values that's going to really blend off these shapes and get them seamless. Okay guys, give it a go.